On Christmas Eve, 2002, a beautiful, vibrant 27-year-old woman, 8 months pregnant, vanished without a trace. Her husband, Scott Peterson, told police she had gone on a walk and never returned. But within weeks, the story would unravel into one of the most infamous true crime cases in America. Welcome back to the Criminal Minds. This is the story of Laci Peterson, a young mother-to-be whose disappearance exposed lies, betrayal, and cold-blooded murder, all beneath the warm glow of a perfect suburban life. December 23rd, 2002, Modesto, California. The house on Covina Avenue looked like something out of a holiday magazine. Strings of white lights lined the roof. A Merry Christmas sign hung in the window, and a glowing baby's room sat upstairs, already painted soft blue with folded onesies in the dresser. Inside that house, Laci Peterson, 27, was bustling around, prepping for a Christmas dinner, washing clothes, and checking off the last things on her holiday to-do list. 8 months pregnant and glowing, she had every reason to be joyful. In just a few weeks, she'd meet her son, a boy she and her husband had already named Connor. Laci was born in 1975 in Modesto, a small city tucked into California's Central Valley. Everyone who knew her said the same thing. She was warm, bubbly, organized, stylish, a born hostess. Growing up, she had dreams of being a wife and a mom and making a beautiful home. In 1995, she met Scott Peterson, a charming golf pro studying at California Polytechnic State University. He had a square jaw, an easy smile, and ambition. They married in 1997. To anyone on the outside, they looked like a couple out of a Hallmark movie. But some things didn't quite fit. While Laci talked openly about her pregnancy, baby names, and nursery plans, Scott, some friends noticed, didn't seem as interested. He didn't attend many prenatal appointments. He avoided conversations about the baby. He spent more time on his boat than helping at home. Laci brushed it off. "He's just stressed about money," she told a friend. "Golf jobs don't pay much." But she had no idea Scott was hiding a second life. On the evening of December 23rd, Laci spoke to her mother, Sharon, on the phone. They talked about Christmas plans, lemon meringue pie, and whether Connor would like his stocking. "See you tomorrow morning," Laci said cheerfully. That would be the last time her mother would ever hear her voice. Scott would later tell the police. She got up around 8 a.m., walked the dog, then went shopping for dinner ingredients. "I went fishing at the Berkeley Marina, but there's a problem. No one saw Laci that morning. No one saw her walking the dog. No store clerks remembered her shopping. By 5:15 p.m., her stepfather Ron called police to report her missing. He'd stopped by the house. The lights were on, the dog was in the yard, Laci's car was in the driveway. But Laci was gone. So was Connor. Modesto police responded quickly. They knew time was critical with a missing pregnant woman. They found Laci's purse and keys still inside. No signs of struggle or forced entry. A mopping bucket in the kitchen, as if she'd just cleaned. Scott arrived home during the investigation and said casually, "Yeah, I went fishing today. Berkeley Marina. Caught nothing." He seemed calm, detached, not panicked like you'd expect a husband to be. That night, search dogs were brought in. They detected Laci's scent, not around the neighborhood, but at the marina. The next day, December 25th, Laci's face was already on the news. Family and friends canceled all plans and started distributing flyers. Scott joined them, sort of. He smiled for the cameras, wore sunglasses, spoke in vague, polished sentences. "We just want Laci home," he said. But there were whispers already, even within Laci's family. Something about Scott didn't sit right. Why didn't he cry? Why did he keep talking about what a great mother she would have been? Why was he already speaking of her in the past tense? As the world celebrated Christmas and the New Year, the Petersons were in crisis. Volunteers combed rivers, parks, and fields. TV anchors camped outside their homes. Reporters dug into the couple's finances, habits, and past. And within days, the truth started to unravel. Because while Laci decorated a tree and folded baby clothes, Scott was making secret phone calls to another woman, one who had no idea his wife, an unborn child, were missing. January 2003, just days after Laci disappears. The media frenzy surrounding Laci Peterson's disappearance was growing by the hour. Reporters hovered outside the family home in Modesto. Volunteers stapled missing posters to lampposts. Candlelight vigils were held every weekend. But behind the scenes, police weren't just searching for Laci. They were now looking into the man she trusted most, Scott Peterson. And within a few weeks, a woman named Amber Fry would walk into the police department and blow the entire case open. In those first few days, Scott Peterson did what most might expect of a worried husband. Sort of, he showed up to some media events, answered some questions, sat beside Laci's mother at press conferences, but his actions didn't match his words. He skipped many of the large-scale search efforts. He avoided family calls. He seemed unaffected. Then came the first public slip-up. When asked by reporters what he was doing on Christmas Eve, the day Laci vanished, Scott said he was playing golf, but his earlier statement to the police was clear. I went fishing at the Berkeley Marina. Golf? Fishing? Which was it? The timeline was cracking. Just days after Laci vanished, a young massage therapist named Amber Fry was watching TV in Fresno, just 2 hours away from Modesto. She saw Scott Peterson's face flash across the screen, husband of the missing woman. Her heart stopped because she had been dating that man for over a month. Amber had no idea he was married, no idea his wife was 8 months pregnant, no idea that while he was whining and dining with her, his wife was planning their baby's arrival. The very next day, Amber Fry walked into a police station and agreed to help. Amber began cooperating with investigators immediately. She allowed them to record all of her calls with Scott, and what came next would horrify a nation. Scott never told Amber the truth. Even after Laci was on every news station, every front page, every talk show, Scott continued to lie. He told Amber that he had lost his wife, but weeks before Laci even disappeared. This will be my first Christmas without her, he said, on December 9th. That was 2 weeks before Laci vanished. On another call, as a massive candlelight vigil was being held for Laci, Scott told Amber he was in Paris. I'm looking at the Eiffel Tower, he whispered, while in reality, he was just a few miles away. The audio recordings were cold, calculated, manipulative, and damning. By January 24th, 2003, investigators were ready. They brought Amber Fry in front of cameras. My name is Amber Fry. I met Scott Peterson on November 20th, 2002. I was under the impression he was not married. She held back tears. I am cooperating with the police. I am not here to hide. I am here to help bring Laci home. Her bravery changed everything. Laci's family, who had been defending Scott for weeks, now looked shocked. The public? Furious. Scott had lied to Amber, lied to Laci's family, lied to the police, lied to the world. As news of the affair went public, Scott Peterson began avoiding reporters. He stopped attending search events. He was caught selling Laci's car just weeks after her disappearance, exploring real estate listings in Mexico, changing his hair to a light blonde color. His lawyer would later say it was to protect himself from the media, but it looked like something else, a man planning to disappear. Before Amber's confession, Scott Peterson was just a grieving husband in the eyes of many. After Amber, he became the villain. Talk shows dubbed him America's most hated man. Crowds shouted murderer outside his house. Laci's mother, Sharon Rocha, publicly withdrew support. I trusted you, she said during an interview. I believed you loved my daughter, but you were living a lie. And it wasn't just public perception that was changing. So was the investigation. With the affair exposed, the motive now made sense. Scott didn't want to be a father. He didn't want to be married. He wanted freedom, and he was willing to kill to get it. Despite everything, there was still a major hurdle. Nobody, investigators had, a shaky alibi, inconsistent statements, a secret affair, suspicious behavior. But they still didn't have Laci. And in California, you can't charge someone with murder without a body, unless you can prove it beyond reasonable doubt. So, for now, Scott was free. But police kept building their case, silently, methodically. They tracked his calls, monitored his bank accounts, put surveillance on his car. And then, one day in April 2003, almost 4 months of the day Lacey went missing, a disturbing discovery washed ashore. It was a warm spring morning in the Bay Area. A couple walking their dog along a rocky trail near the San Francisco Bay shoreline in Richmond stumbled across something strange tangled in the reeds. It was small, pale, misshapen. At first, they thought it was a doll. It wasn't. It was a decomposed body of a full-term baby boy, umbilical cord still attached. The next day, just 1 mile from that discovery, a second body surfaced, this one barely recognizable. It was the torso of a woman, headless, handless, and legless, wearing maternity clothing. Police had been waiting for this moment, and dreading it. They knew Lacey and Connor Peterson had finally been found. News broke before noon. Every major outlet cut into their programming. The nation was glued to their screens. The bodies had washed up near the exact location Scott had told police. He went fishing on the morning Lacey disappeared. The Berkeley Marina. It was a very detail many believed too odd from the start. A man goes fishing alone on Christmas Eve with no bait, just hours before his pregnant wife is reported missing? Now it seemed to all come together. Though the woman's body was severely mutilated, the clothing matched what Lacey was last seen wearing. Tan maternity pants and a cream-colored shirt. DNA testing confirmed it within days. The infant was Connor Peterson, the unborn son of Lacey and Scott. The female torso was Lacey Peterson. The cause of death could not be determined. The damage from decomposition and marine exposure was too extensive. But prosecutors didn't need a cause of death anymore. They had something else. Bodies, motive, lies, timeline, opportunity. Now they had a murder case. On April 18, 2003, 5 days after bodies were found, police tracked Scott Peterson to La Jolla, a wealthy suburb near San Diego. He was in his Mercedes-Benz, parked near his family's home. He didn't resist, but what investigators found in his car left them stunned and convinced he had been about to flee. Scott Peterson had $15,000 in cash, multiple cell phones, camping gear, a shovel and rope, his brother's driver's license, his hair dyed blonde, a map of the Mexican border. And just like that, the man who had been free for 4 months was now in handcuffs. That same day, the Modesto district attorney announced formal charges. Scott Lee Peterson is charged with 2 counts of murder, one for Lacey Peterson, one for her unborn son, Connor. The decision to file 2 murder counts set a national precedent. Lacey was 8 months pregnant. Connor had not yet been born, but prosecutors argued that Connor was viable and thus a victim. The public agreed. Vigils turned into memorials. Posters turned into tribute walls. The phrase "Justice for Lacey and Connor" appeared on shirts, banners, and bumper stickers. At a press conference shortly after the arrest, Lacey's mother Sharon Rocha stood at the podium, tired, tear-streaked, but resolute. "Our worst fears have come true. Lacey and Connor are gone, but they did not die in vain. We will see justice served." Sharon's strength became the voice of grieving mothers across the nation. She had stood beside Scott during the search, believing in him. Now, she stood against him, demanding the full weight of the law. Scott Peterson was no longer just a suspect. He was now a symbol of betrayal, of domestic violence, of hidden evil behind suburban walls. People saw in him the perfect husband with a dark heart, the man who traded his family for freedom, a sociopath who smiled while lying to the world. The media dubbed it the trial of the decade, and it hadn't even begun yet. Just days later, Scott stood in court in an orange jumpsuit, wrists shackled, and pleaded, "Not guilty, Your Honor." His attorney, Mark Garagos, promised to prove Scott's innocence. "This is a circumstantial case. There is no weapon, no cause of death, no eyewitness. My client did not kill his wife." But few people believed him. The public, and likely the future jury, had already made up their minds. After nearly a year of anticipation, the trial of Scott Lee Peterson began in a tightly secured courtroom just outside San Francisco. Hundreds of reporters gathered. Camera crews set up permanent spots on the sidewalk. Protesters shouted outside, holding signs like "Justice for Laci" and "Death to Scott." Inside, 12 jurors and 6 alternates were selected from over 1,000 candidates, most of whom admitted they had already formed an opinion. This wasn't just a trial. It was America's courtroom. Scott Peterson faced 1 count of first-degree murder for the death of Laci Peterson, 1 count of second-degree murder for the death of unborn baby Connor. If convicted, he could face the death penalty. Lead prosecutor Rick DeStaso wasted no time. He opened with a haunting statement. Scott Peterson didn't want to be a father. He didn't want to be a husband. So he made Laci and Connor disappear forever. Their evidence wasn't built on a smoking gun. There wasn't one. It was built on behavior, lies, and timing. Here's what they laid out. Scott's affair with Amber Frey. Amber testified under oath, detailing Scott's deception. Recordings were played for the jury. Cold, calculated phone calls while Laci was missing. The fishing trip lie. On the morning of December 24th, Scott went fishing at a bay he had never fished before. That exact bay is where the bodies later surfaced. Suspicious behavior. Selling Laci's car within weeks. Turning the baby's nursery into a storage room. Searching for water currents in San Francisco Bay. The dog walk cover story. No one saw Laci walking the dog that morning. Scott claimed she went walking after 9 a.m., but her hair straightener was still plugged in and warm at 10:15. Concrete evidence. A witness testified that Scott had bags of cement in his warehouse. Only one was missing. They alleged he used it to make homemade anchors to weigh down the body. The courtroom went silent as Amber Frey entered. Dressed simply, hands folded, she sat and recounted how Scott had told her in early December, "This will be my first Christmas without my wife." That was 2 weeks before Laci was reported missing. She was calm, firm, honest. Her voice cracked at one point. "I believed him. I believed he was a good man. I had no idea." Her testimony stunned the courtroom and likely sealed Scott's fate. Scott Peterson's lead attorney, Mark Garagos, came out swinging. He claimed there was no physical evidence linking Scott to the crime. The bodies were too decomposed to determine the cause of death. The media poisoned public opinion, making a fair trial impossible. Garagos also suggested a possible burglary near the Peterson home that day, proposing that Laci had walked in on it and was taken. But there were no eyewitnesses, no suspects, no supporting evidence, and it was hard to argue against. The timeline, the affair, the lack of emotion. Every day, Laci's family sat in the front row. Her mother, Sharon, her stepfather, Ron, her brother, Brent. They listened to every word and watched every detail. Occasionally, Sharon would look at Scott and shake her head. They had once invited him into their family. Now, they watch him fight for his life in court. The jury was overwhelmed by the audio tapes, the media pressure, the gruesome photos. They were told that nobody doesn't mean any crime. They were reminded that circumstantial evidence, when stacked, can become undeniable. For months, they listened, took notes, argued in private. Then, in November 2004, after more than 5 months of trial, the jury reached a verdict. The courtroom was packed. The world was watching. We, the jury, find the defendant, Scott Lee Peterson, guilty of first-degree murder in the death of Laci Denise Peterson. We, the jury, find the defendant, guilty of second-degree murder in the death of Connor Peterson. The room exploded in gasps. Some wept, some cheered. Scott Peterson barely flinched. On December 13th, 2004, the jury returned for sentencing. We recommend the death penalty. Scott was formally sentenced to death by lethal injection at San Quentin State Prison. We never know where evil might be lurking. It might be with someone close or anyone we just don't know. In the case of Laci Peterson, it was someone she shared everything with and trusted. And if you believe stories like Laci's deserve to be remembered and told, hit that subscribe button, give this video a thumbs up, and share it with someone who needs to hear the truth. This is A Criminal Minds, And we won't stop until every silence is broken.